Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Russian missiles fell on the Ukrainian port city of Odessa overnight, destroying a shopping mall and 2 hotels, leaving at least 1 person dead. The assault came as Russian forces reportedly crossed a key river in eastern Ukraine's Luhansk region as they seek to cut Ukrainian supply lines. In Mariupol, Russian troops commemorated Victory Day Monday with a march to the streets of the occupied city, joined by pro-Russia separatists. The parade came as Russian jets continued to bomb the massive Azovstal steel plant, where hundreds of Ukrainian soldiers remain holed up. Ukrainian officials say 100 civilians are continuing to shelter in tunnels under the plant, contradicting earlier reports that the last civilians had managed to leave. In Warsaw, Poland, protesters surrounded Russia's ambassador to Poland Monday and doused him in red paint as he prepared to lay flowers at a monument to Soviet soldiers who died defeating Nazi Germany in World War II.
I think that they did not have to come today and put flowers at the monument because they are aggressors in Ukraine. They can't do this. Ukrainians are with me today. A man from Belarus is with us. We all want there to be no more war.
The Russian embassy filed a formal protest and blasted the Polish demonstrators as admirers of neo-Nazism, unquote. In Russia, unknown hackers altered satellite and cable television menus to display anti-war messages Monday before Russian censors were able to take them down. The messages read in Russian, quote, "You have the blood of thousands of Ukrainians and hundreds of dead children on your hands. The TV and the authorities are lying. No to war," they said. President Biden signed a bill to speed up U.S. shipments of weapons and ammunition to Ukraine. The bill revives the 1941 Lend-Lease Act, which the U.S. used to arm Britain and other allies against Nazi Germany during World War II.
The cost of the fight is not cheap, but caving to aggression is even more costly. That's why we're staying in this.
Biden's signature came as Democratic lawmakers reportedly agreed on a proposal to provide nearly $40 billion in additional funding to Ukraine, even more than the $33 billion Biden requested in April. The House could vote on the plan as early as today. In the Philippines, protests broke out Tuesday in response to the landslide victory of Ferdinand Marcos Jr., the son of the late Filipino dictator, in Monday's presidential election. His running mate is Sara Duterte, the daughter of current President Rodrigo Duterte. The election was plagued with violent attacks at polling sites and delays triggered by glitches in vote-counting machines. Marcos's chief rival was Leni Robredo, the country's current vice president. She spoke as election results were announced Monday.
Even if a lot of votes have not been read, even if there are still questions in this election that need to be answered, it is clear that the thoughts of the people are becoming known. For the sake of the Philippines, which I know you really love, we need to listen to this voice because, in the end, we share one country.
The Marcos dynasty returns to power some 36 years after the family fled a mass uprising in 1986 that ended Marcos's brutal 2-decade dictatorship. Marcos's government committed serious human rights violations, including forced disappearances and extrajudicial killings. He was also accused of corruption of looting the Philippines' treasury. Ferdinand Marcos Sr. died in 1989 while in exile in Hawaii. We'll speak to the Nobel Peace Prize-winning journalist Maria Ressa tomorrow on Democracy Now! In Mexico, 2 more journalists have been killed in the Gulf Coast state of Veracruz. Yesenia Mojinedo Volcani was the director of the online news site El Veraz. Sheila Johanna Garcia Oliveira was a reporter at the same outlet. News of their deaths came as journalists across Mexico took to the streets protesting the murder of another journalist in the northern state of Sinaloa, Luis Enrique Ramirez. At least 11 journalists have been killed in Mexico this year alone.
The wave of murders against the journalistic profession has become uncontrollable. Today, just as we are protesting here in Mexico City, in Tijuana, and in Sinaloa, we learned the sad news that 2 of our colleagues were taken from their lives in Veracruz. It is carnage against journalists in our country. There are no guarantees. The Mexican state is not providing the guarantees so that we can freely exercise our journalistic exercise in Mexican territory.
In Ecuador, at least 40 4 people were killed during a prison riot near the capital, Quito, Monday. Over 100 others escaped after violence broke out. Relatives gathered outside the prison waiting for news of their loved ones. Human rights groups have denounced the horrid conditions of Ecuadorian prisons, which are dangerously overcrowded and rarely provide programs that help people rehabilitate. Hundreds have been killed in at least 5 separate prison riots in Ecuador since February of last year. In northern Pakistan, a massive lake of meltwater from a Himalayan glacier burst its banks Saturday, sparking a flash flood that swept away a major bridge and damaged homes and businesses. Pakistan's climate change minister warned dozens of other glacial lakes are threatening to inundate cities and towns downstream. Pakistan and India just experienced their hottest month of April in over a century of record-keeping, with temperatures soaring to more than 120 degrees Fahrenheit in parts of South Asia. In Brazil, deforestation in the Amazon rainforest surged to a new record high for the month of April. Last month's forest loss nearly doubled the amount reported last April, which itself set a record. Deforestation surged under the right-wing presidency of Jair Bolsonaro. South Korea has sworn in a new president. Yoon Suk-yeol took the oath of office earlier today at a ceremony in the capital, Seoul, promising in his inaugural address he would work to denuclearize North Korea, which he called the South's main enemy.
If North Korea genuinely embarks on a process to complete denuclearization, we are prepared to work with the international community to present an audacious plan that will vastly strengthen North Korea's economy and improve the quality of life for its people.
Yoon is a hawkish, conservative former prosecutor and political newcomer who holds anti-labor and anti-feminist views. As a candidate for president, he threatened a preemptive strike against North Korea. He also promised to abolish South Korea's Ministry of Gender Equality, though he has since backed off that pledge. Back in the United States, about 150 protesters marched to the Washington, D.C. area home of Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito Monday evening after a leaked draft opinion showed Alito and the court's conservative majority are poised to strike down Roe v. Wade, which legalized abortion nationwide. Monday's protests followed weekend demonstrations outside the homes of Justices Brett Kavanaugh and Chief Justice John Roberts. In Texas, Republican lawmakers say they're preparing to focus on preventing women from leaving the state to seek abortions elsewhere if the Supreme Court strikes down Roe v. Wade. Republican State Representative Briscoe Cain said, quote, "We'll continue to do our best to make abortion not just outlawed, but unthinkable," he said. On Capitol Hill, Massachusetts, Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren's calling on her colleagues to pass the Women's Health Protection Act, which aims to codify Roe v. Wade. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has scheduled a roll call vote on the bill for Wednesday, but the measure appears doomed since it lacks the 60 votes needed to overcome a Republican-led filibuster. A warning to our audience, this story contains graphic images and descriptions of police violence. A Texas grand jury has indicted 3 Dallas-area police officers on charges they physically assaulted Black Lives Matter protesters in 2020. The indictments were announced Friday, nearly 2 years after the murder of George Floyd by a Minneapolis police officer sparked protests across Texas and around the world. Dallas SWAT officers Ryan Mabry and Melvin Williams face multiple charges of aggravated assault by a public servant and deadly conduct. Williams was fired from the Dallas Police Department earlier this year over an unrelated excessive force charge. A third officer with the Garland Police Department faces a single assault charge. Among those injured at the protest was Brandon Sands, who was shot in the face in May 2020 with a so-called less lethal round fired by a Dallas police officer. Sands spoke to Democracy Now! Less than a month after the assault.
When I woke up out of surgery, that's when they told me I lost my eye. My jaw was twisted, my nose was broken, and I got metal plates right here, metal screws in my nose, and a plate right here on my cheek.
Amnesty International documented at least 125 instances of police violence against protesters in 40 states and in the District of Columbia in the weeks following George Floyd's killing, where officers responded to peaceful protests with unlawful beatings, tear gas, and rubber bullets. And finally, the Pulitzer Prize Board has honored Ukrainian journalists for their, quote, courage, endurance, and commitment to truthful reporting. Following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the New York Times also won a 2022 Pulitzer Prize for their, quote, courageous and relentless reporting that exposed the vast civilian toll of U.S.-led airstrikes, challenging official accounts of American military engagements in Iraq, Syria, and Afghanistan. Maria Hinojosa and the staff of Futuro Media won for audio reporting for their podcast Suave that profiled David Luis Suave Gonzalez as he re-entered society after serving 30 years in prison. Maria Hinojosa posted this video on Twitter as she shared the news with Suave on Monday.
Guys, we won a Pulitzer. We won a Pulitzer Prize. We won a Pulitzer for Suave. What? It's like I never even thought of winning a Pulitzer.
We will play our interview with Maria Hinojosa and Suave done a year ago later in the broadcast. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman in New York, joined by Democracy Now! Co-host Juan Gonzalez in New Brunswick, New Jersey. Hi, Juan.
Hi, Amy, and welcome to all of our listeners and viewers across the country and around the world.